All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, looking for a motion to go into open session.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 I didn't hear them all. Bill, did I hear you?
Sure.
Steve Gallardo, I don't think I heard you either.
Be sure to unmute your mic.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I had to turn on my microphone here.
Very good. Did I hear an aye also?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Okay. Okay, I think that means I just go into session. All in favor say aye. Aye. Open session. Okay, good enough. Made myself confused there for a moment. All right. We are now going to item 1, which is planning considerations for the 2020 November general election, and we will wait to make sure everybody is on the phone.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that Scott Jarrett is on the phone.
Okay.
Keeley. And Ray.
Are we
Ray
waiting on Keeley?
She may be just joining by phone, which she wouldn't be able to see on the monitor.
Okay. Yeah. Is she on?
This is. Hello. I'm here.
Okay.
This is
Okay.
Keely, so,
Good.
but I'm not talking unless you need me to. Ray and Scott got this.
Okay. Very good. Okay. So we have the first picture on the screen. Scott, are you starting us off today?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. We appreciate your time this morning and the opportunity to discuss and present to you or provide an update of the November general election, and then also review lessons learned and experiences that we've had from conducting elections from the March presidential preference election to the August primary election in an era of COVID-19, and then how those experiences and lessons learned are framing our decision making as we move forward with preparing the plans, the early voting plan that Ray's team is developing, that the recorder will be approving in mid-September, and the plans that my team is developing in collaboration with Ray's team to present to the board in mid-September for your consideration and approval. So we're really appreciate your time, and just would like to just go forward, and both Ray and I will take on different portions of this presentation.
Okay, great.
So,
And I will just tell also everybody that's viewing out there, my 3 colleagues are on the phone and attending the meeting as well. And guys, because I can't see you, there's no laptop, just jump in there if you have a question, and we'll get it answered, okay? So go ahead, Scott.
thank you. So as we've all experienced and we're well aware of, COVID-19 is disrupting our lives in many different ways and changing the way we work and collaborate with our coworkers. Even when we're in the office, we're now meeting in virtual environments, to the ways we're learning and going to school, to the ways that we're grocery shopping and shopping for clothes. If we're not doing it online, we're now doing it wearing masks and physical distancing. And as we've seen over the last several months nationwide, elections are not immune to being disrupted from COVID-19. However, Maricopa County Elections Department is dedicated to providing voters with as many familiar voting options as possible for the upcoming election. We understand that if voters are not able to vote in a way that is familiar to them, or at least provided that option or that opportunity, that could build distrust in the process. So we're committed to making sure that we're at least providing those opportunities. However, we have to balance that with the realities of COVID-19 and how we provide safe elections for voters in Maricopa County. And some of those realities require us to redesign and make sure that we're providing options that will be viable. And some of those lessons we've learned from the March presidential preference election, when we were using 229 voting locations, and at that very last minute, we had to redesign an election due to locations not being available. So we learned from that point, and we carried that forward to August. And now as we're designing the plans for November is having to be flexible. The ability to be flexible adds reliability to the voting process. We need to be able to adapt and overcome for the unknown, because at this point in time, there is still unknown. We have been able to work through and identify different options that work in providing elections in the COVID-19 era. However, we don't know what it will look like 2 months from now, and what COVID-19, how that will be impacting us as an election department and impacting a voter's choice to participate in this election. But we're confident that with the lessons that we did learn in those experiences and how we've designed our strategies, that we can provide a reliable, transparent election that's done with security and integrity, and working in collaboration with our partners, always adopting options and opportunities to continuously improve. We will be prepared for the upcoming November general election, and both Mr. Valenzuela and I will be discussing those as we progress through the slides. So some of the factors that we're facing and the headwinds are no different than they were in March and in August. And some of those are our existing polling locations. Many of those are unwilling to serve as a voting location, or they do pose a potential cancellation risk at the very last minute. And then even if they are willing to provide a voting location to us, they are too small to implement physical distancing. So, and one thing that we've learned, and I've learned as hosting elections, is elections are a very large logistical challenge of interconnected variables that are dependent on one another. And as you make changes to one variable, that could set into effect motions and dominoes that impact other decisions and other options for the election. There's a few examples that I just want to describe too. Is when you're attempting to add different locations, you need to be able to know that you have the capacity to support those locations. So from a standpoint of, it's not just adding one or two more locations, it's, do I have the poll workers that are willing to work in that location? Do we have the PPE, the masks, the gloves, the cleaning supplies to be able to support that location and keep that location safe? Do we have the capacity within our warehouse to store the supplies in order to be able to keep those locations clean or safe? Do we have the capacity in the warehouse to add additional logistics, additional drivers, additional teams to support those operations? So when you're thinking about expanding an election and how many voting locations that you're adding, you need to factor in, are those locations large enough for physical distancing, and all those domino effects down the line. So, and that's one of the things that we did learn, is there's just not enough locations available for us to get to that 500-ish that we would have wanted for precinct-based voting. So at this point in time, we would want the board to consider, we used a successful vote center model for the March presidential preference election, a successful model in the August primary election, and then rolling it out for the November election and having the board consider that. Of course, expanding the number of locations, getting as many locations as possible. And at this point in time, as of this morning, so in the August primary election, we had 99 locations, and we have been able to expand that. We're up over to 140, and we're in contact with about 125 to 30 more locations to get it as close to 170 locations as possible. So with that,
1 second.
Go ahead.
Bill Gates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Scott. I certainly understand why you're suggesting that we don't have each one of the polling places that we would typically have given the unique situation that we're in. But my question for you is for those people, especially where we're talking about a presidential election. So you've got folks that maybe literally the last time they voted was November of 2016. What do you have in place, or what are you working towards that will help let those people know, not only those that are really technologically savvy, but maybe those who aren't, letting them know that they're not going to be able to go to that polling place that they normally go to, and that we would be using this voting center model?
So, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Gates, and that is one of the lessons learned from the March presidential preference and the August primary. First off, with the precinct-based voting is when we had to make those changes at the last minute, we had to find a way to inform voters that their precinct did change. But as far as now, we're moving potentially to a vote center model. And for those voters that are those casual voters that maybe only vote during a presidential preference election, ensuring that they have the information available to them. And that is going to be part of our paid media campaign. So we're adding a lot more funding to our paid media campaign. We'll talk about this in a few slides, but really making sure that we're alerting voters that there has been a change in their voting location. We do send out a direct mail. We'll be sending out direct mailers, not only a postcard, but we also send out a sample ballot a few weeks ahead to all those voters that have not requested an early ballot or are not on the permanent early voting list, letting them know of how they can find out about their voting location, whether that is to go to our website or to call in, and we provide a phone number for them to find out that information. So, and then not only are we looking at the paid media campaign, but the earned media campaign. We have a great team of communications professionals that will be making the circuits, the rounds through the news media, doing interviews to inform voters of the change. And then also we're creating some explainer videos that we'll put on our website that talk about what is a vote center and how you can find out your voting location.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jarrett.
Okay,
So,
continue on.
are there any other questions, Mr. Chair, members of the board, before I hand it over to Ray to talk about safety and how we're preparing to have a safe election?
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Chukri.
I just want to compliment you, Scott, because you're making great progress to bump it to 40 already, and I don't know where you were, just a week ago or so when we had our call, but congratulations on making some great strides.
So, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Chukri, yeah, we've got a team here that is devoting all their efforts, pretty much around the clock. They're even here this weekend, contacting different locations, really trying to identify where we have those gaps. And we still do have some gaps, and that's what the plan is. We're just right over 140, getting to 170, and that will fill in those holes to really serve those voters. And the goal is to have locations really close to voters, being anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 miles away from where they currently live.
Great.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for putting 120 of them in District 2, too, Scott. That's awesome.
So, well, as you'll see, especially when we do the plan, we've done our best to make sure that they are geographically dispersed, despite your encouragement to have them all in district.
I'm kidding, of course. Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Valenzuela.
Okay. Welcome, Ray.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman, member of the board. It's a good segue into obviously the difficult process it is. Us veterans, I almost said us old folks, but us veterans of the election process know how difficult it is and appreciate the efforts that the team has given in light of COVID. I mean, that's the big factor. We lost schools, we lost community centers, nursing homes at community centers. So But the good news is that we've, again, implemented these safety protocols that, despite the fact that that is one of our factors we need to make sure we have the social distancing, we do have and have successfully deployed the CDC guidance with regards to these safety protocols. A little bit further in the slide, you'll see we do have some lessons learned where we need to look at certain factors, and we will implement and as an example, individuals that couldn't wear the mask and the shield and their glasses. It was fogging up, and it was a safety hazard. So it's just little kind of idiosyncrasies, but I just want to, know that we are still considering that as a factor with regards to both the early voting in person and, of course, election day. And we're successful enough to where we just have some minor things to tweak. And then we'll move into next slide, Scott. Some of the important stuff with regards to where we are in this general election and what we'll see in the plan. There we go. So what we have here is a great, obviously on top of the safety protocols, the CDC guidelines, is providing the voters with options. And again, we're trying to drive this home with the August primary and now this election. So those options are obviously the ballot by mail. I wanted to give you some numbers. As of this morning, we are at 1.9 million people, or 1,909,608. That is a pretty substantial growth in permanent early voting, and we continue to grow. I'll give you the quick numbers on the Republicans are 694, Democrats 664, Independents 534, and Libertarians 16,000. So in the two parties are fairly balanced with regards to the permanent early voting option, but it is a ballot by mail option, which is what we're pushing towards. We also have, of course, the early ballot secure drop boxes. That's one of probably our main pluses that we had. We had more people drop off ballots, which is great because they're listening to the media campaign and the paid advertising to say, if you get a ballot, you have the option to drop it off, especially in light of these USPS kind of circumstance that is out there, which I can say for certain that both Co-Director Jared and I were on the phone with the regional Arizona, New Mexico director of the USPS, and they have not made a single change to our sort facility. So I just want to put that out there for your benefit, that it is exactly the same as we've seen years ago. So our mail will be processed at the same speed and the same handling that it had in the past. So that's good news. But in light of that, we'll have the early ballot drop boxes, and we're looking to have more of those. Currently, I think for the primary, we had 15 city town clerks. Our facility, the McTech 24/7, we're looking to grow that to about 20 plus. And further down the slides, that we'll have some where we've got even more options with regards to innovative ways to offer that at, and I know I don't want to say too much, but we have looking at spring training facilities. We're looking at all these facilities that are unused right now, unfortunately, if you're a sports fan, but fortunate for elections that maybe we can tap into those. And they have the skill set to guide people through with cones and such. So we're really excited about increasing the Dropbox presence. But know that we have 100, if you will, when we have the 170 sites, that is 170 Dropbox locations on top of being in-person voting sites. So this 50 to 20 will be in addition to. The in-person early voting election day, again, this is status quo. Yes.
Is there a question?
Yeah, there is. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I might, Mr. Valenzuela, thanks for your presentation. You mentioned sports came up, and it was certainly in the news last week that the NBA has offered up their arenas as election locations. In fact, I think Mr. Fontes even tweeted about it. I just want to confirm that you're hearing the same thing that we are, which is the Suns Arena, the Talking Stick Resort Arena, will actually still be under renovations, so it's not going to be available for a voting location. Is that your understanding, Mr. Valenzuela?
Chairman, Supervisor Gates, that is. And then in addition, and Scott can elaborate more since it is election day, but we have collaborated with that. And unfortunately, in addition to that, there is some logistical issues with the arena with regards to parking and accessibility. It could have been if it had not been renovations, we definitely could have looked to work towards that or make it a drop box. But we have compensated because we have the Phoenix Convention Center, which is down the street, and 2 other locations west and east of that. So we definitely would have. It's a good branding, but unfortunately it won't. The Suns Arena won't. But again, we do have some spring training facilities and such that we may be able to tap into.
Great. Well, being a longtime Suns fan, I was excited about the opportunity, but that's unfortunate that good for them that they're doing the renovations, but it won't be available. So thanks for clearing that up. I appreciate it.
And then moving forward, we have, again, this is just what we've done in the past, but again, it's proven itself up, these phased openings of Vote Anywhere. We have the 27 days, which is the first day to begin early voting, which is October 7th. And we'll see that on the calendar. And then we're moving into, and that's when we'll open 6 vote centers on October 7th for early voting in person. Then we move into 14 days of voting, as we call it, and that opens October 20th. And that is where we're going to look to have 50. So it'll be 6 plus the 44 additional, 50 total sites open at 14 days or 12 days out, but 14 days of voting. And I just wanted to let you know that again, I always am excited about having Scott on the team with his auditor experience. Although when he first audited us, he wasn't a friendly, he was more foe, but he brought that to the department, his skill and his expertise to come in and do some amazing work of true data-driven decisions to look at that 14 days, for example. Why don't we open it at 18? Well, we're seeing that the human nature is they start seeing that about 2 weeks out, start realizing I got to get in there. So that is one of the days. And there is one, and I don't know if Scott's going to mention it later, about giving the board workers a break during that 14-day run. That's one of our lessons learned, that we burned them out by election day. So we are looking to potentially close on the second Sunday before the election, which would be 13 days out, only because we had, I think, under 100 voters. Scott, if you can confirm, on the second Sunday.
Mr. Balanceway, that's correct. That Sunday that was 2 weeks out, we did have under 100 voters, and we toyed with whether, well, maybe we'd keep it open on the Sunday, but then close it on the Monday. But the Monday actually turned out to be a high volume day as far compared to the Sunday. So that's why we chose, we'll take the Sunday off, give our poll workers a break. And then we also have some other strategies that we're implementing to help alleviate the longer shifts for our poll workers so they aren't burnt out by election day.
But again, it's just a data-driven decision that, and it's second Sunday, not the Sunday right before. The Sunday right before will still be open for emergency voting, but I just wanted to point that out, that again, we are definitely taking lessons learned and using data to make those decisions. And then again, of course, our normal 7 days out, we'll open up another 40, which would be a total of 90 early voting sites by October 27th. And then we move into the 2-day, 1 day, which is under Scott's purview, which is emergency voting, and the board's purview, emergency voting and election day. Again, it does include the weekends other than that Sunday that we mentioned. We are increasing the check-in stations. Some of these, we already have done that as a model to make sure nobody has under 6 or 9 check-ins, but there will be some that we can increase that. And of course, if we get to 170, we'll have more ballot on demand. As done in the primary, the lease place, the malls, those were great. People know where the malls are. And since they are having reduced traffic, it's good to be able to utilize still those lease spaces on top of shopping centers. And those, again, the key thing, because we're going to 170, is there is no location that is more than 2 to 3 miles from any given residential area. That's the key part, on top of being able to do the throughput by having 9, 12, 15 check-ins. It's almost, again, and I do emphasize that in past elections, with the 503, we had 3 check-ins. So if we put 9, 12, or 15, even 9 is almost equivalent to having 3 polling places in one location. So having the reduced 170, but having 9 to 12 still gives us that 1,500 check-ins that we would have seen in a general election at 503 smaller locations. So that's the key thing, is 503 at 3 check-ins would still get us 1,500. 170 with 9 to 12 will get us at that 1,500 throughput. Next slide. I think this next slide, Scott, is yours to speak on. Any questions on the sites, or we're good?
Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor Gallardo.
Thank you. Yeah, real quickly, just either Ray or Scott, I think it falls under Ray's umbrella here, but I was really excited pre-COVID or even prior to the beginning of the summer. We were looking at Desert Sky Mall out here in the West Valley, and I was really excited because very familiar with that mall. It is the jewel out here in Maryville. It really is. Everyone goes there, very family oriented, a lot of foot traffic. So I was really excited to hear about utilizing that as an early voting center. And then, of course, because of the unrest during the summer, I know that some of the malls or the leasing folks got a little nervous, and they kind of pulled that idea away from us. Has there been any discussions? I was just at the mall over the weekend, by the way, just this Desert Sky Mall, and just looking at the foot traffic, the number of people there. I mean, you have a lot of nonprofit type organizations that are there in the mall just because of the foot traffic. You know, I didn't know if there was any discussions. I know they were a little nervous back in July, but has there been any new discussions? Even, man, as a possible drop-off spot, I mean, there's just so much potential there because that is kind of the community hub out here. This is where everyone goes. This is where we shop, and so I didn't know if there's any discussions or, you know, thinking back, perhaps maybe folks will feel a little bit more comfortable there at the mall to have something. I just hate to not utilize it.
So, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Gallardo, yeah, we've been in discussion with the owners of the malls here in the Valley, and we actually does look like we will be using them again for the upcoming November election, which is great news. But for the Desert Sky Mall, the economy has not seemed to diminish their retail facilities in that location. So they did not have a location that, at least according to the owners of that mall, that could be used for a voting location at this point in time. But we can circle back to see if they'd be willing to use that as one of our drop box, drive-through, curbside drop box.
Okay. I was just so excited when the plan was originally to utilize the mall, that particular mall, because I mean, it is the jewel of the West Valley out here in Maryville. It really is. It's the central hub where everyone goes. Families are there doing their shopping, and they're eating lunch or dinner, whatever. And so it would be ideal place, if anything, just to remind people to don't forget, elections are right around the corner. I noticed the sheriff's office had a big kind of poster display there, encouraging people to apply for jobs with the sheriff's office. So I just believe it's just a central location, and there's just a ton of foot traffic there inside that particular mall, and it would just be a great addition to our whole plan. And if I can help, because I know a lot of those folks there, I'd be more than happy to do what I can to help.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor Gallardo. We appreciate any assistance that you can provide, or any of our community partners out there in finding those locations that help us get and to add those additional 30 locations for this November general election. We are in communications with several different options at this point in time, but not all of those may pan out or come through. So we welcome any help or assistance. So as with when one of the things that we've learned, and this is the lessons learned, is when you've changed a model from a precinct-based model to a vote center model, or as Supervisor Gates was asking earlier, is how do you inform the voters? How do you get that information in the voters' hands so they can still successfully participate in this election? And what we've learned is, well, we have to meet the voters where they are. And so there are those traditional outlets that we will use, which will be television commercials, billboards, print media. But there's also then even emailing voters that we have email records for. But then there are new ways in which we can reach those voters. And there is now streaming media that we will be using and putting commercials on. So if you are getting your TV through the streaming service that you currently use, you will still have commercials from us at the Maricopa County Elections Department. We're also putting information through our social media channels as well. And then we're going to be adding, as I alluded to, creating explainer videos that we'll be posting on our website and then pushing out through our social media accounts. And those explainer videos are going to be describing how you can vote by mail. How do you track your ballot? How do you return your early ballot? What do you need for IDs at the polling locations if you do visit a vote center during early voting and election day? And that is one of the new changes in statute that now voters are required to present an ID when they vote early as well. We'll be including videos on, they can watch how their ballot is tabulated, or a ballot is tabulated at a tabulation center. And then also describing what is a vote center and how you can find out where the closest vote center is on election day. And also, in addition to those explainer videos, we've introduced a personalized dashboard, and that's beballotready.vote. And that is where voters can go to that website and enter in some pieces of information about themselves, and then they can find out what is their registration status, if they're signed up for the permanent early voting list, what party they're registered with, what is their current address that they're registered, also what is on their ballots. They can get an example of their ballot, a sample ballot for the upcoming election. They can also get where their closest voting location is as well, all on that personalized dashboard. But another lesson learned, and actually something that we implemented in August, was we needed to be able to inform voters of where those voting locations are. So that's where we revamped our entire locations.maricopa.vote webpage to be much more searchable than it ever has been in the past. So that allows voters to search locations based off of their current address, and that'll shows the locations that is closest in proximity to them. But they can also search by the closest city. Like if they just want to filter down to one particular city, they can do that. If they want to filter down by the locations that have the shortest wait times, they can do that now because we've posted wait times on our website, locations.maricopa.vote. So this is a significant improvement for how we're informing voters of their options and where they can vote. And this, coupled with our paid media strategy, the commercials will be alerting voters to go to this website or to call us at 602-506-1511. That information that they can then get the information that they need about where they can vote and their vote. What is their closest voting location?
So, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Just a brief follow-up, Scott. Thanks for that. Again, I've got constituents who don't go on the computer, and so if they call that phone number you just mentioned, can they get that information read to them that's on that dashboard?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Gates, yes, they can. So, and that is actually the STAR call center that they will be calling into. It's currently staffed with call center employees. They have access to the website, so they can relay that information. The voter can say, this is where I am. It doesn't even have to be where they live. It can be where they're working currently. Or if they're out shopping, if they want to call into that number, then provide that address, or even the zip code in which they are, or the location they're planning to be. The STAR call center employee can access this website and relay that information, saying you are currently this far away from this many vote centers. This is the vote center that has the shortest wait time at this point in time.
Okay, well, that's great. Just as long as we make sure that in those instructions they receive that it explicitly says that, that's going to be wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
You bet. Go ahead.
And Mr. Chairman, President Gates, the sample ballot that we sent out and the direct mailer that we're sending out will describe that process for you.
Great. Okay, continue on.
Also, in addition to informing voters of how to participate in this election, we're informing the media and the voters of what they can expect for reporting results. And we're very grateful to the Board of Supervisors and the investment that they made into our tabulation department and purchasing us brand new tabulation equipment in June of last year. And that's not only expanded how quickly we can count ballots and report results, and this was a testament in August. We were able to get through and have 97% of all the early ballots that were returned as of Sunday night included in our reporting results on Tuesday election night. So the equipment has really proved how quick we can count those votes and get those votes reported, and we're going to need it because while we had over our nearly 800,000 ballots returned early for the August primary election, we're expecting it could be up to 1.8 million for the November general election. So we will, even though we have this new equipment and it is faster, the board also provided us with some additional resources and staff that are working in our tabulation center. So they will be, not only do we have the additional staff, but we're going to have to probably implement longer shifts to get through all those early ballots to be able to report them on time. And that is something that we did see in jurisdictions across the country. There were delays in reporting results, especially those early ballot results. So, and our plan and our strategy is to get through as many of those early ballot results that come during that early voting period and get those reported on election night. And that's, I mentioned, there's all these interrelated dependencies and variables within an election. And one of the strategies, by having those early ballot drop boxes, 50 of them open 2 weeks in advance of election, 90 of them open 1 week in advance of election. That allows voters to be able to drop off their ballots early and get those back to us so we can get them through the process sooner so they can be included in those election night reporting results. But for those ballots that are dropped off, what we call those early late ballots that would either be dropped off on that Monday before the election or on election day themselves, and that could be upwards of 100,000 or more ballots that come in, then we have the additional staff, we have the faster equipment that we can put that to work, expanding those shifts so we can get through them as quickly as possible. But with our communications team, we're going to be putting together an educational packet that describes the timeline that it takes to get through those ballots. Because many of those early ballots, especially if they come in on election night, they won't be delivered or dropped off until early in the morning Wednesday, some of them even. And then we need to put them through all the same security protocols that would do any ballot or other early ballot. Make sure that they are signature verified. That is the way to validate that that voter that received that ballot matches the signature that we have on file. And then after they've been signature verified, we have bipartisan early ballot processing boards made up of Democrats and Republicans sitting there separating the ballot from the envelope and then putting them into batches, creating audit logs, transferring those to our ballot tabulation center. And then similarly in the ballot tabulation center, it's under 24/7 live camera feeds. We have political party observers in our tabulation center that are overseeing that process. Just to make sure that we have a very secure way of handling these early ballots, especially those ones dropped off on election day, and to get them processed as quickly as possible. But it is important for us to be able to inform the media and the voters so they can expect that timeline and how long it will take us to be able to process those ballots after the election night. Any questions related to reporting results?
Mr. Chairman,
Supervisor Gallardo.
thank you. Scott, talk to us, and I understand the process for the early balloting and the process it needs to go to before we get counted. But election day, those folks that go to the polling site on election day, and normally, traditionally, and both political parties and the media and the public in general expects that at 8 o'clock it's going to be all the early ballots that have been processed and received are going to be released right at 8 o'clock, and then shortly after you'll start seeing some election day voting. These are folks that actually go to the polls on election day to vote. What's the timeline for that? Because I think there was a couple of folks from our media friends that were kind of questioning the delay in the primary election, but I didn't know in terms of the general election, because I think we are going to have huge numbers. I didn't know what that process would look like, or at least a timeline on when the public can expect from the election day, not early voting, but election day, those that go to the polls.
So, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Gardo, you are correct that first initial reporting at 8 p.m. on election night is the early ballots that have been processed. And then we are waiting for our poll workers, so the polling locations, to close up and make sure that very last voter in line was able to cast their ballot. And then the poll workers start the closing process of each polling location or each vote center, and bringing us through a secure process back the ballots and the memory cards that we can read in through election night. So that process is entirely contingent on how many voters we have vote and when we can close those voting locations. And then after that, getting those ballots and those memory cards back to us in a timely manner. And we are implementing some strategies and another opportunity for lessons learned. In the August primary election, we had these large voting locations. So it took our poll workers much longer to close up those locations. So a strategy that we'll be implementing for the November general election is those ones that have those 12 check-in stations or 15 check-in stations. We're going to be hiring additional poll workers to work those locations, but we're also not going to wait to bring back those memory cards and the ballots until the entire location is closed. We're going to ask them to send those additional, and they have to be transported by 2 poll workers, one a Democrat and a Republican, and bring those to one of our secure receiving sites, and then bring those back to us earlier into the night. Now, it still will take some time, and setting those expectations for the media is important. So it will take some time, but we should be able to expedite that process and be a little quicker than we were for the August primary.
Great question, Steve. It comes up quite often. Okay, continue on.
So with any election, the election department cannot provide an election without collaborating with our partners. And those partners include our poll workers, and they are some of the most dedicated individuals that are willing to come out and serve in an election. And for the August primary election, many cases serve for 2 straight weeks or 1 straight week of voting. And as Mr. Valenzuela alluded to earlier, we did recognize that we put them through very long days in working in the election. And so we are implementing different strategies. One of those is to be closed that Sunday, that's just over 2 weeks, or right around 2 weeks before the election, giving them 1 more day off. But then also allowing them to take a few days off if they are working 2 weeks through that early voting period. So getting all 10 hired in time so that they can have a couple days off. But as we are nearing the election, especially as we're entering into that emergency voting weekend, then having as many of them available to serve the voter as possible. And then obviously everyone working on election day themselves. So we really are grateful for our poll workers, but it's not just our poll workers, it's our county departments. We have public health help us design our safety protocols for this election. We have the Office of Enterprise Technology serving us in so many ways, helping us with several different projects. want to just provide Rebecca Quince. She has been helped serve when we were implementing our tabulation equipment as a project manager. She's helped every election day, helped in our command center in different ways. So, but it's not just Rebecca Quince from OAT. We had several of their staff helping set up voting locations during the August primary, as well as supporting us on election day when we had some issues with printers and we needed to repair a printer on site. We had the real estate department with all those leasing facilities that we're adding to support this location, really help negotiate those leases in a very expedited way. It could take 4 to 6 months to get a lease through the process, and they've been able to do that in 2 to 3 months, really accelerating that negotiation process. The sheriff's office providing us security at our receiving sites as we're bringing back those ballots, but also on election day themselves, being able to respond to any issues we may have out in the field. Protective services coming in and providing security of the McTech building itself. 24/7 hours, 7 days a week, they are providing security over this building, and that starts a month out before the election. And then with all the new PPE, the masks, the gloves, the cleaning supplies, we've run out of room in our warehouse. So, but McDOT came to the table and they provided us room within their warehouse. So we've sent over 70 pallets of items that we don't necessarily need for this election, but we'll need in future elections. So we're able to take part and use their warehouse. Plus, for the August primary, we had 20 different departments provide staff to serve in the election. And we expect that'll be even more for the November general election, because if we can add those 2 days, those voting locations that are open for those 2 days, that allows a lot more county employees to be able to work this election than they did in August. I'll let Mr. Valenzuela discuss and provide a thank you to some of the cities and our community groups as well.
Chairman, members of the board, absolutely. The cities and towns, again, I mentioned early on about the 15 drop boxes. They stepped up, those that could, and more are willing to now, like I said, to specifically serve as drop box sites, because their facilities may be too small to serve as a polling place of now with the potential COVID. But those 15 city and towns were amazing partners. We're hoping to get more, and they actually are providing staff at no cost to the department to help us manage and secure that. We're still doing courier service, but I want to a big shout out to them. And also, as following the presentation here, the community groups. We just met with several of the community groups, one specifically, a whole litany of all voting is local, Lula, all these ones that we had a Zoom meeting just last week and got a lot of feedback from them. So we thank them too for providing that feedback. We also met with the political parties. We got to thank them too. One of the things I just had things that we didn't consider. We will have a lot of observers at the polling place for the general, both for the Democrat, Republican, and federal, and whatever it may be. But meeting with them, one of the things that we took from it was we require those individuals to provide credentials, obviously for security purposes. But then we also require our board members or our poll workers to call in to say there's an observer there. Not so much because, oh my gosh, there's an observer there. We want them there, but because we want to be able to log that we had those. But one of the lessons learned is parties came back and said that's intimidating for the observers, because they come in and they kind of, let me see your paperwork, and then they get on the phone and start calling in right away. So we're found a way to do a little bit better protocol, inform the observers what's expected of them, and our board workers to welcome them. So just want to thank all around the parties, community groups, cities and towns, and again, as God mentioned, the facility owners, especially at the different strip malls that partner with us. I've been trying to get them to let me work at the Paradise Valley Mall. The polling place is right next to C's Candy. So, Scott's not giving in on it. But thank you to all.
Very good.
So yes, we're really grateful to the feedback from the parties themselves, and we want to make sure that those political party observers do feel welcome in the polling locations. We look at them as an asset to providing integrity in the election. If they are able to observe the processes, and if there are concerns or issues that are occurring, they are also another set of eyes that can see that there is a concern going on at a polling location and report that back to us, so then we can address that issue. So we did actually, as a result of meeting with them, we refined our training materials a little bit, even in the one-page handout that we send out to all of our polling locations. One of the first steps was to welcome those political party observers right at the very top, make sure they feel welcome, and then find an optimal viewing area within the voting location that they can observe but not impede the voting process. So that's the balance that we're having to strike, that those political party observers, we welcome them there, but we don't want them to interfere with the voting process. So finding that location that they're not going to impede that flow. So as always, and one of our essential pieces of our mission statement is to always look for areas that we can improve. And in ways that we're looking to do that for the upcoming November general election is really refining our turnout forecast and evaluating in-person voting patterns. And we'll go through a little bit of that in slides to come. As Mr. Valenzuela stated earlier, our PPE guidance, and we had created a safety hazard by having to require poll workers who wore glasses and a face shield and a mask, it fogged up and they couldn't see. So we're refining those procedures. But we also sent a survey to all of our poll workers to identify what was their experience wearing the PPE. And 95% of them had a positive experience. The vast majority said it didn't impact their operations at all. And so we look at that and we look at the procedures that we set up with our partner, the County Department of Public Health, and they were a success. Now we just need to fine tune them to ensure that we're keeping our voters safe that want to visit in-person voting location, but also our poll workers safe. Our wait time reporting. So we found that it was very successful in the August primary election. But we only had we had 83% of our poll workers reporting wait times every 15 minutes. This was a significant improvement over elections in the past where we were asking them to do that in the March presidential preference every 30 minutes. In 2008 elections, we did it every hour. So we expanded that down to doing it 4 times on the hour. And we did achieve an 83% compliance rate, but we want to get that to be as close to 90% as possible, especially if we're informing voters of what those wait times are, if they're going to be making decisions on where to vote on those wait times. So one of the strategies we're looking to implement is for those locations that do have 12 and 15 check-in stations, expanding, adding 2 poll workers, additional poll workers in those locations, so we can ensure that we're reporting those wait times as routinely and consistently as possible every 15 minutes. We're also expanding our training for our troubleshooters, providing them a lot more hands-on training and experience with our equipment. We have the brand new precinct-based tabulators. And part of having a brand new piece of equipment is we did run into a few challenges for the August primary election. And some of those memory sticks that we used to report those results, we had some locations that didn't return them on election night. So by providing the troubleshooters extra training on this equipment, we're revising our checklist procedures to have actually the inspector right away sign off on that they pulled out those memory sticks, they've included in the bubble pack, and then immediately sending those poll workers with the ballots and the memory sticks to the receiving sites, so that they're going to get to those receiving sites earlier. And if they happen to forget something, while the other poll workers are still closing down the polling location, then we can actually send those 2 poll workers back, the Republican and Democrat, to pick up anything that they may have forgotten. We're adding another layer of quality management at those receiving sites. And this is where some of our county employees can really step up and provide some assistance, and giving them an additional checklist that they're reviewing to make sure every single item that's on this checklist was received and accounted for from the polling location, and not letting those poll workers leave until we've been provided. And then one other piece, our strategy that we're looking to improve is really providing more opportunities for voters to drop off their early ballot. we know that we're providing that already just through the expanded early voting period, having 50 voting locations for 2 weeks, 90 for 1 week, up to 150 for 2 days. However, we want to provide options for voters so they don't even have to visit a voting locations. So this is where we're looking to reach out. We've been in contact with several of the spring training facilities throughout the valley. So looking to get those throughout the valley locations where voters don't even have to get out of the car. Contactless curbside drop boxes. They can just drive up and drop off their ballots for us or to us directly rather than having to mail them back through the post office. So I'm going to let Ray cover this slide. And the first of three that we're talking about trends informing our decisions.
Thank you, Scott. Chairman, members of the board. I'm going to go real quick on this because this is already a mention that we have seen. One of our options is ballot by mail. The expansion of the permanent early voting is amazing and astonishing with regards to, you'll see just a year ago, we had a little bit under 1.6. We are now at, and this, as of this slide that was just built yesterday, we show 1,905,279. I have the screen in front of me, and we just grew by another 4,000 by this morning. So we are at now 1,909,608. And literally, if I hit refresh, if that's how much I think people are listening to the ballot by mail, and I won't call it vote by mail because you get a ballot by mail and you can drop it off, you can mail it back, or you can again use it as a reference, if you will, and come vote in person, early or on election day. But impressive, 313,000 new voters on the permanently voting list. And again, I gave you the numbers with regards to breakdown by parties. We can present that to you if you want that by email, but quick down is that voters are listening, and we are also increasing our one-time request. Our portal will be going live today to allow for that one-time request if you don't want to sign up for the permanent early voting list. But again, very impressive numbers. Scott, I'll turn it back over to you for election day. Next slide. And just one other highlight, as Ray mentioned, 4,000 increase, but over the last 2 weeks, we're having 1,500 voters sign up for the permanent early voting list a day on average. So that is a significant increase just over the last 2 weeks. And we expect that trend to continue as we move towards November.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Jack.
Yeah, Ray, thank you very much. I think we all would be interested in having that breakdown emailed to us.
Seems to be a little bit of a delay on progressing through the slides, but so the next trends that are informing our decisions are, and Ray covered the permanent early voting increases, but also in-person election day or election voting participation. That's what this slide is showing here. And despite that we're having, for the last several elections, an increase in total turnout, the trend has been towards early voting and significantly decreasing the voters who choose to vote in person on election day. If you go back to 2006, we had 50% of voters choosing to vote in person, about half or just over half. And since then, it's steadily declined to 18.6% in 2008. And if you follow that trend line in 2020, it would be less than 10% of voters that would choose to vote in an election or participate in an election on election day. But we also use other data to drive our decisions in determining on how we will be prepared to serve voters for the upcoming election. Not only the number of people that we need to staff in our early voting processing boards, in our central count tabulation center, but also the number of poll workers that we'll need to hire to staff our polling locations, the number of polling locations that we need to have. And then, as Mr. Valenzuela stated, the number of check-in stations that we need to serve voters in the upcoming election. And we'll have, right now at this point in time, we're planning to deploy over 1,600 check-in stations throughout the valley. which would be more than enough based on it takes anywhere from 2 to 2.5 minutes for a voter to check in using our check-in stations. So if we have 9 check-in stations per location, that means we can get about 3 voters through the line and checked in per site per minute. But then that's also, we need to look at where those voters tend to vote in person and doing those point density heat maps to identify those in-person voters, looking at historical patterns, where in 2016 were those in-person voters, in 2018 where are those in-person voters, and then comparing that to time of day patterns, whether they vote 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. or 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. or 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. And then making sure that we have enough check-in stations available in those regions where they potentially would be problematic. So it's not just finding the number of voting locations, it's making sure that those check-in stations are located in the correct voting locations. So we will have voting locations in Tonopah, Gila, Waddell, in the West Valley, far West Valley, but we don't need to put 9 to 12 check-in stations in some of those. Some of those, it's fine to have 3 check-in stations because that will serve the number of voters. But if we come to the heart of Central Phoenix, or the Southeast Valley in Mesa, where there are a pattern, a history of in-person voters, those are the locations that we need to expand upon and have 9, 12, 15 check-in stations in every single one of those, and large enough check-in stations are large enough voting locations that we can expand the number of booths so voters can have the time that they need to be able to vote the ballot. So those are just some of the decisions that we're making, but we've also had an increase in in-person early voting. So I want to just provide some stats on the August primary election. And we had, in 2018, we had 4,369 in-person early voters. In 2020, we had 11,841 in-person voters. So a significant 2.7 times the amount from increase from 2018 to 2020 for the August primary election. And weekend voting, we had in 2018, we had a whole 343 voters vote on the weekend for the August primary. For 2020, that went up to over 5,000 voters voted on the weekend, a significant increase. During emergency voting in 2018, we had a total of 280 voters vote for emergency voting weekend. For 2020, we had 5,284. So again, we're seeing this trend to vote early, and we appreciate that because those voters that do choose to vote early, that creates the capacity for us to be able to serve those in-person voters that want to vote on election day, that want that election day experience, that helps us keep those lines as short as possible on election day. So given those, and this is still early and preliminary, but given the analysis that we've done and based off prior voting patterns, and if you look at 2016, that's the last election that we had the highest historical turnout was 2016, and it was near 80%. 79.7% of voters participated in the 2008 election. In the 2012, it was down to 74%, and in 2016, it was at 76%. So if we estimate that 80% of voters, that would be historic turnout, participate in this election, we'd have over 2 million of those voters cast a ballot in this election. And 85 to 90% of those would most likely do that early, with 10 to 15% of those voting on election day. So we need to be ready to be able to handle in our central count tabulators and through our EV processing boards anywhere from 1.7 to 1.8 million ballots coming through the central count. And then we need to be prepared to handle and support and serve 200,000 to 3,000 election day voters. And so that's the model that we will be designing as we prepare our plans for your consideration in a few weeks. as we design our plans, we've established the framework and key priorities for the upcoming general election. And that is really to build on the lessons learned from March and August, provide voters with safe voting options, importantly, to allow voters to choose how they want to participate in the election, whether that be vote early through the mail, vote early in person, vote early dropping their ballot off at one of our drop boxes, or vote in person on election day. The voter can make that decision for themselves and choose to participate. To provide and then really develop those strategies that we can inform voters so they can choose to successfully participate in this election. So these are some of the key goals and priorities. Ray, are there any that you want to highlight?
Yes, real quickly, Chairman, members of the board, I wanted to, because I know Supervisor Gates mentioned, I want to drive home the fact that we are informing, we're giving options. But one of the things is how to get those folks to know those options are available. On top of the sample ballot, I wanted to point out that the general allows for us to partner with Clean Elections, with the Secretary of State. So I wanted to point out that actually on top of paid advertising, social media, the mailers, the sample ballot example, Clean Election is also doing a statewide pamphlet for all the statewide candidates. They are putting in there for specific for locations.maricopa.vote for voters or guiding them to our site. So there's another opportunity to inform voters. The Secretary of State's proposition pamphlet will have information on early voting and how to go about contacting us. The JPR, or Judicial Performance Review pamphlet, all of these will be utilized to get out the vote message and let people know about these options. So again, great partners, and didn't want to fail to mention, again, Clean Elections, Secretary of State, Judicial Performance Review on top of our other methods. And then again, our big goal is to build trust in the process, but more importantly, also remove barriers so these voters can. So I just want to emphasize those partners that we have for that.
And then on top of that, it's just going back to the nuts and bolts of election and ensuring that we're providing voters with a secure, transparent, reliable election that's done with integrity. And those explainer videos will help us do that. And that's, again, in communicating to voters, but then all those security procedures that we're implementing across the spectrum, whether it be early voting, whether it be on election day, whether it be after the election in our tabulation center, all of those security and controls that we implement to make sure that it's a viable election for Maricopa County voters.
Chairman, member of the board.
Go ahead, Ray.
I'll take it. I wanted to announce that this is the last slide, so if that gets you a little bit excited. But it's one of the more important slides. Again, key dates for all of the get out the votes for you as members of the board and as candidates, if you will, that know these dates, promote these dates. Again, we're preaching to the choir because we've overstated these several times, but they're important. Military and overseas voters always go out at 45 days. So September 14th, this election starts. There is not November 3rd, although that's an important day as well. First ballot in hand is on September 14th. So, and that's a Saturday. So but again, we usually see a ballot back within an hour. Once we electronically deliver a ballot to somebody at Fort Hood or in Afghanistan even, they are that active, and I'm excited to get these voters the particular ballot. Again, this slide speaks for itself. October 5th, very important day for registration, which is Monday, always falls on a Monday. Then Wednesday, we mail these ballots out. We will, as I indicated, I just looked right now, we are at 1,909,752. Grew another 152 people voters since the beginning of this slide. So Scott says I'm trying to rule the world with people and take away all of his election day. And then he said, but go ahead. We'd rather have people have that option for election day, but not that they have to do that. So that's a good thing. Ballots mail October 7th. 23rd, the last date of request, which is always 11 days out. Friday, 5 p.m. on that, October 23rd, last day. Then, as we indicated, 14 days out, we're opening up the weekend voting. That's Saturday, October 24th. One other thing to point out that we are conforming to the USPS recommendation change from 6 days to 7 days as far as returning the ballot, telling the voter, put it in the mail instead of 6 days out, to put it in the mail October 27th, which is 7 days prior to the election. So that is our new promoting. We do, and we have emphasized that our instructions have been printed, and it does say return no later than 6 days. We can't correct that because we have 2.5 million of them printed, but we will do a big campaign, the statewide campaign. All 15 counties will be promoting that date. Then last but not least, November 3rd. That's election day, and we're all looking forward to that. And I don't mean that facetiously. I really think it's going to be a great opportunity to prove us back again to be best in class. So, Scott, if you got anything from there.
Yeah, so I echo Ray's comments that providing voters the options to choose how they want to participate in this election. This calendar helps inform those voters of what those key dates are. And as he said, his strategy is to have as many voters sign up for Pebble as possible. And I absolutely support that. But I also want to make sure that voters are aware that they can vote in person. They have a viable in-person voting option, whether that be early or on election day. With that, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we welcome any questions that you may have for us.
Okay, before I open it up for any questions or final comments, I want to let my colleagues know, because you can't see this, but there have been 26 citizens on the line listening to this meeting. They have been asking a few questions. I want to let everybody know that the elections department are getting your questions and will be answering those in the next day or two, maybe even today. But I wanted to also just give a smattering, I'll just put two questions out here that came in from the internet, so to show that we are listening to the public. A lot of people have questions, concerns, other things, and we will stay in contact with those questions as they come in, no matter if it comes in on this meeting or comes into our elections department as we go further. There is a question that was asked, so Scott or Ray, you can take this. If a voter is wearing a mask and face shield, how do you verify their identity?
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, so we do not ask a voter to remove their face shield or their mask during check-in. And state statute requires that a voter provide ID. Does not require that a voter provide a photo ID. They can provide an ID that could be a bank statement and their voter registration card. What the statute requires is that a voter provide an ID that matches the roster. And our roster is the Sitebook check-in station. So what our poll workers are trained to do is make sure that the ID that is provided by that voter matches the information that is on the Sitebook check-in stations. We cannot ask a voter to remove their mask. If they felt that they were exposing themselves to a health risk and then refused to vote, then we could be impeding that voter's right to vote or participate in this election. So we are not asking voters to remove their masks. We've even instructed our poll workers not even to make that request, to just review the ID or the information that is provided through the form of ID, whether that be a photo ID or some other form of ID that meets state statute guidelines, then compare that to the roster, our Sitebook check-in stations.
Okay, I hope that answered our voters' questions, or our citizens' questions. One more, and Ray, I'm going to give this one to you because Scott answered the last one. So many senior centers are in lockdown. How are we making sure they have an opportunity to vote?
Chairman, members of the board, I'm glad you asked that question because we're really proud of the fact that we're leading. And actually, Secretary of State has even asked us, we have a meeting with other 14 counties, how are we doing this? Well, the fact of the matter is, it is correct. We're not allowed in the nursing centers, so we've went one step further. And kind of what we're doing here now is I'm able to talk with you and meet with you via digital or an interface. So we are accepting requests from individuals at a nursing home that need that special election board, 2-member differing party, the Dem and a Rep, to go out and assist them with voting. They have a physical limitation. In past, we'd go right into their nursing home room. We'd introduce ourselves, and we would assist them with marking the ballot. We're doing this now, but through, we have purchased iPads to assist us, and we're actually taking that iPad to setting up the appointment, doing everything we have the ballot in hand, and we're sanitizing it, put it in a safety Ziploc, if you will, making arrangements with the nursing facility and the voter. The nursing facility would take it to the voter. It's already set up, ready to connect with us. And our SCB teams are right outside in the parking lot. And so just like I'm talking to you, I can talk to the voter. So we have been very innovative in saying all I need to know is a voter feels confident that they're talking to the 2 member boards, or we let them bring their own device. So a lot of these grandparents and older generations are used to Skype and FaceTime with their grandkids. So we can say, do you want us to bring a device, or do you want to use your device? We make the appointment. We do all the validation of the voter. The difference is, instead of standing in front of them, we're just like I am to you. I'm allowing you to see the ballot. I'm showing you what I'm marking as if I were right in front of you. So I think we have found a new way that maybe even COVID has brought to us, that an individual, we actually have one voter. This stands for one voter that actually is, I'll call like the boy in the bubble. They can't touch paper. They can't touch ink. We have voted them for years through their window. We would come up to their window. We'd have the 2 member boards. So the difference is now it's a digital window. So we can do that. We are doing that. And it's a great best in class, once again, that others are looking to rob and duplicate. R&D, if you will, but we call it rob and duplicate. So we can't handle it.
Very good. All right. So I will go one at a time, being that he asked the first question. I'll let him ask the first question here. Supervisor Gates, do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I asked my questions as I went along, but again, great presentation by both of you. Thanks for the incredible work that you guys have done. Really appreciate you. Ran a great election, both of you, in August, but you weren't satisfied, and you've pushed yourselves to the next level, because this does have to be best in class. We recognize that the eyes of the country are going to be on Maricopa County for good reason. Much hangs in the balance, and so appreciate the work that you've done. But in particular, as it relates to Election Day, I wanted to thank Scott for the work that he's done to get, and we went through, and I want the residents of District 3 to know that we went through specifically some holes that through talking with our constituents, and Scott through his analysis as an auditor. And by the way, the auditors are not foes. I heard that comment earlier. I know that was said in fun, but Scott, with your background, it really allowed you to focus in on some areas where we do need additional coverage in District 3. Love the one at Paradise Valley Mall next to C's Candies. I think I might have to go over there as well. But that's going to be really important, so that all of our voters have that opportunity to vote on Election Day. So great work. And as well, Mr. Chair, thanks for all your leadership on this.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, great. Now I'll go to Supervisor Gallardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to echo what Supervisor Gates has stated to both Scott and Ray and the entire teams down there on the work they have done, not only in the primary, but coming towards this upcoming November election. I don't think, and I was sitting here trying to kind of look back, I don't recall one negative comment, either privately, a text or email or phone call, we received on the primary election. It really did move nice and smooth. We saw a record number of voter turnout all over the county. It was just a remarkable job that the entire team has done, so kudos to them. The upcoming election, it really just shows that we are really prepared for this. I looked through this whole presentation, and I'm really excited to see all this come about. Like any other elections, you're going to have some challenges here and there, and I think we are prepared to deal with those challenges. I strongly believe that a lot of our state statutes, I know this is a legislative thing, but some of our state statutes are pretty antiquated when it comes to elections in 2020. The early balloting cutoff day, that Friday at 5, I think that's always, I always felt that was silly. The technology has changed, and statutes should reflect that. There should be a nonstop, continuing voting all the way up to Election Day. I think even the early voting cutoff date is antiquated as well, too. I think technology has changed so much that many of these provisions that were put in statute made sense back then. They don't make sense in 2020. But nonetheless, we got to deal with those, and those are legislative battles we'll deal with when the legislature gets back into session. But in front of us, I think we have a solid plan. I think we're geared up to deal with a record number turnout. I think there's excitement on both sides of the aisle, and that's good. That's good. You see more and more folks getting involved in the democratic process. A lot of more folks getting vocal as well, which is okay. It's all part of the process. So I'm really excited to see what has happened. Whatever I can do from District 5 standpoint, I am on board to do whatever I can. On the primary election, our whole office was driving around at different sites, just kind of making sure everything looked smooth. We weren't going inside the polling centers, but we were driving by, just making sure everything's were done correctly, and people were having no obstacles in terms of voting. So other than that, I just say kudos to Scott and his team, and Ray and his team, and everything they've done to get us to this point. And it's all in the middle of a pandemic. That's what's so amazing, that we're doing all this, record turnout, super excitements on both sides of the aisle, and we're doing it all in the middle of a pandemic. So kudos to everybody. I've said this once, I say this again, is the most fundamental right we have as Americans, our right to vote. And anytime we have a process that's in place to allow us to do this without any barriers or obstacles is what we're supposed to be doing. So kudos to everyone. Thank you for your work, and I look forward to doing whatever I can to help make November 3rd a success.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor Gallardo. Supervisor Chukri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not to echo or not to repeat what's been stated by my colleagues, and I certainly agree. And to something you stated at the outset of your term, Mr. Chairman, pre-COVID, pre the pandemic and everything we're unfortunately having to deal with today, was you wanted to make sure that we followed this as closely as possible, that we had meetings just like this, so something couldn't slip through the cracks, or the unexpected would come to fruition and we'd be surprised. So I think to credit you, Mr. Chairman, you stated that before you became chairman, and I think we're seeing that today. And then to simply pivot over to both Scott and Ray, the reason why we've had the success that Mr. Gallardo just stated was because we have gotten so granular on this. And I think this speaks to the larger picture and the larger issue of why we changed elections the way we have. Let's not forget where we were in 1955 as to where we are in 2020, and the reason why elections has needed the infusion of money as it relates to equipment and capital expenditures, but also as it relates to just the sheer population growth we have witnessed, not only as a county but as a state. So I think this is great, and I like the approach, and I don't want to. I think the name of the animal is like a honey badger, but that just keeps going and going and going and going and going, and I think that's what our elections team is doing, and I'm grateful for that. Unlike Mr. Gallardo, I have heard some, not necessarily complaints, but some areas of how, hey, can we change this or can we improve it? But some of our volunteers, as Scott Jarrett will know, had brought to my attention some of the ammonia and the cleaning products has gotten to them and made them feel ill. We can't be perfect in what we do, but we certainly listen, and I know that we're working to try and maybe find some alternatives there. So I mentioned that, again, just to state the granular nature we are going at. We're not letting any rock go unturned, and when we have those types of requests about how we can be better, no matter how trivial they may appear to be to some, we're simply going to follow through and do the best we can. So congratulations. I think this was very thorough, and I know we're going to continue to have these conversations up until the November 3rd election. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for the nice comments, too. Now, my vice chairman, Jack Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I agree with all the comments that have already been made, so I won't repeat those. But, to me, the most impressive thing about this is we've had a constantly changing environment through all of these elections, and the team has really kept us in the loop on everything going on and kept us advised on all the changes that need to be made, told us when they need our help, and we've been there. But perhaps the most impressive thing to me has been the teamwork that's gotten us to this point. With all the updates and all the information that we've had, when I've had constituents call me or contact me with questions, because we've had these updates, I've been able to answer most of them. But when I couldn't answer them, Scott would always be available to come to my rescue and talk to the people and let them know exactly why we were doing what we were doing and how we were doing it. And when it became a Ray question, Ray was available to answer those questions. So the teamwork has really been impressive, and I couldn't be more proud of what we've accomplished. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jack. So, yes, there will be probably another couple of meetings before we have to decide on an election plan altogether as it gets presented to us with the number of locations and how we're going to do it. That's going to be, again, extremely transparent of what is making our decision. Cora, I want to corroborate all the points that my colleagues have said. We get to do now almost a two-hour meeting, but that's not even touching half of the stuff that we've been talking about since the presidential preference election. And I was really happy to see in your presentation that you guys are even talking about some new procedures that we are implementing just on some lessons we learned on the primary that just happened. It just occurred this past month. So thank you guys for your hard work. Also, speaking of Jack's concerns where constituents call, we have to be, almost experts at so many different things. Vector control, restaurant inspection, the whole thing. So it's great to know that there is a team in place that is capable of answering questions quickly and thoroughly. So two concerns I had, I know that I'm going to continue to talk about just offline will be the security of our polling places on the run up to the election. We didn't really talk about that, but I know some great thought and procedures are being put in to make people feel safe as they exercise their constitutional right, as Steve Gallardo said. The other thing is, Joy, you're sitting here listening, but also the great work that you've been doing to entice the county workers to show their stuff on those, especially the Monday and Tuesday prior to the election. Going into the sites on both the presidential preference election as well as the primary, I got to meet a lot more county workers doing a job for us that they don't usually do. So I will wholeheartedly hope that county workers will help us get trained and help us again with what was called, as Supervisor Gates said, the Super Bowl of elections that it's coming. And we all know it. We're planning, we're training, and we are going to pull off a great election in November. So, that being said, thank you guys for everything you've done. Thanks for the great presentation. I know there'll be a couple more coming our way here in the next couple months. And with that, I am going to excuse you to go back to work again. So thanks for that. I will now, I believe, be looking for a motion to go into executive session. All right. So, Mr. Vice Chair.
So moved.
Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Guys, give us 5 minutes. If you need to transfer over to another device, is that a call-in? We will get ready for you within 5 minutes. The time is 11:03 that I can see on this clock. On my phone, it's 11:02, so right around 11:07, we'll be back in executive session. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today, including the public.